Welcome to the Power of Now What, a podcast on overcoming the various challenges and problems that one encounters when on the spiritual path, when on a spiritual journey, when engaged in a practice or discipline such as meditation, and even post-awakening and post-enlightenment. This is episode 20 on the very difficult subject of how to heal from childhood trauma and negative early experiences in life. I'd like to speak on my particular experience with recognizing childhood trauma for what it is and my experiences of healing from childhood trauma and negative early experiences. I would also like to speak on the unique challenges that the spiritual path and meditative practice has when we are also trying to heal from childhood trauma, because naturally we have this paradox that occurs if we're trying to bring ourselves fully into the here and now and recognize the truth of the present moment. There is no past, there is no future, there is only ever now. So how do we reconcile this paradox when we have these experiences that we have had in the past that seem to continue to have this negative emotional charge that interferes with our inner peace in the present moment? I would also like to speak on the solutions that I have found to this and the spiritual approach to finally being free from this, to finally fully healing from this. And perhaps it's good to say right at the start is that you can heal from this. You can. There seems to be a growing trend of people saying that you'll never be fully free of it. But in my personal experience, I've had that in every aspect of my journey where I have healed and I have transformed. I've always had people telling me that you can't do it for whatever reason. I had people telling me you'll never be fully free of alcoholism, you'll always be an addict, all of that sort of stuff. I had people telling me I won't be able to lose weight because, it's genetic and all of that kind of thing. And they've been proved wrong every single time. Yes, you can fully recover from alcoholism. You can recover from addiction. You can lose as much weight as you want to lose. You can. You absolutely can. And childhood trauma and healing from very difficult, very negative experiences in the past, it's absolutely possible to fully heal and fully recover. It absolutely is. So if you have found this podcast today because you have suffered with this and you are engaged in a process of healing and a process of trying to recover and move forwards in a healthy way in your life, keep going and keep trying. And if what you've been doing thus far doesn't seem to be cutting it, just keep going, keep trying, find new avenues, find new methods, new techniques. You're always building knowledge, always building strength and resilience, and you can get out of the other side of this. So this podcast today is an exploration into the phenomena of overcoming childhood trauma, recognizing childhood trauma, overcoming childhood trauma, and some of the spiritual approaches and practices that we can begin to engage in order to finally heal from and reconcile this very difficult, very painful past. I'd like to begin by telling you a story about a knight who travels the land, defeating monsters. And the more monsters he defeats, the stronger he becomes. He gains skills, knowledge, experience, and strength. He finds better weapons and better armor, and so he takes on bigger and bigger monsters. And for years he travels the land and defeats monster after monster, evil creature after evil creature, until at some point he realizes that these monsters just keep coming. No matter how many monsters he defeats, no matter how many that he vanquishes and sees off, they just seem to keep coming. And he realizes that he needs to find the source of where all of these monsters are coming from. It's no good just defeating monster after monster. He's going to have to find where they are coming from. He travels the land in search of the origin point for where all of these monsters seem to emerge from, and in time, eventually, he finds a cave on a hill. And he notices that all of these monsters emerge from out of this cave. So, with all of the skills, the knowledge, and experience that he's gained from fighting the monsters thus far, he puts on his armor, he picks up his shield and his sword, and he takes himself to the cave and enters. And in the cave, he finds the biggest, the worst, the most awful, terrifying, and horrifying monsters of all. They lurk in the shadows, they lurk in the dark, they hide in the corners of the room. Some of them are small with sharp teeth, and they scurry through the shadows, up walls, and across ceilings. Others are gigantic and fierce, and they carry huge weapons, and they have strength in their muscles and in their jaws and in their claws. And the knight fights his way through and defeats each of these monsters in turn. And the fight and struggle is exhausting, and he keeps fighting. And each layer of the cave that he goes down, the monsters get bigger, worse, stronger, more evil. But he keeps fighting. He keeps fighting through exhaustion, through fear, through pain, through suffering. He keeps fighting through the darkness, even though the cave gets darker and darker, and he moves further and further away from the light that was at the entrance of the cave. He knows that he must get all the way to the heart of the cave. He must travel all the way to the heart of the darkness. For if he does not get to the heart of the darkness, if he does not defeat the source and the origin of the monsters, these monsters will simply respawn and will simply be birthed anew. So this time, there is no turning back. He just pushes on further and further into the cave. And as he goes down further into the darkness, layer after layer, as he travels deeper into the heart of the shadow itself, the monsters become ferocious and revolting, horrifying, disgusting creatures. But he defeats each of them, undeterred, unbowed. He is not afraid. He keeps driving forwards, pushes and pushes, until at last he comes to the final room, the final cave, the origin of it all, the deepest, darkest shadow from which all of the monsters are emerging. He braces himself for this final, deadly combat. He breathes deeply and builds up his resolve for one last push. He is exhausted. He is wounded. He is hurt from all of the fighting. His shield is almost shattered. His sword is almost blunt. His armor is hanging off of him. He gathers himself for this final push, knowing that this has to be done if he wants to rid the land of the monsters forever. He enters the final cave, the final room, and in the center, he finds a child. The child is crying, and the child looks just like him. And the child's name is I'm Scared. The knight, seeing this, drops his sword and drops his shield, and he walks up and he embraces the child in a hug. The child is crying and says, "Are you here to hurt me?" And the knight says, "No, no, you don't have to be scared anymore, because I am here to protect you now." And the child says, "Am I in trouble?" And the knight says, "No, I understand. I understand why you created these monsters. I understand why you created these shadows. It is because you are scared. And there is no shame in being scared. There is nothing to be ashamed of. You're not in any trouble. You are safe now. You are safe." And the child, still crying, says, "How do I know? How do I know that I am now safe? I don't feel safe." And the knight says, "You are safe because I am here. And I am strong. And you know I will not abandon you, because I have fought all the way from the light, all the way down. I have fought through horror. I have fought through terror. I have fought through the deepest, darkest, worst things that it is possible for somebody to fight through. And I fought my way all the way down here to you. And now I am here to protect you. You don't have to be afraid. You do not have to hide in the shadow anymore. And you do not have to surround yourself with monsters. You're going to come with me. And together, we are going to be safe from now on." And the child stops crying. That story is probably the best metaphor and analogy that I can give for recovering from childhood trauma and recovering from all of the issues that childhood trauma and negative early experiences creates. So, if nothing else, just that story alone, just understanding and really getting to grips with what happened there in that story at every stage of the way will tell you everything you need to know if you really want to heal from this horrific past. Now, for me on my journey, I, I find it quite interesting. I don't know if this is common in recovery. Everybody's recovery journey is very different. Everyone is so unique and so individual that everybody is going to have differences in their what firstly what they needed to recover from, and then the methods of how they recovered from it. But my particular recovery involved ceasing an alcohol addiction, becoming abstinent from alcohol. I needed to get to grips with my anxiety and my depression, the mood disorders, and I needed to lose a lot of weight because I was type 2 obese, and I needed to lose weight and sort of get my body fit and healthy. And I took a very direct approach in all of those things. I used AVRT to recover from the alcoholism. I used CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, for the mood disorders, the anxiety and the depression, and very direct meditation in order to sort out the symptoms of the anxiety and the depression. And with the weight loss, I just took the most direct approach that I could find, which is calorie counting and exercising quite intensely as often as I could. And all of it worked. It all worked, actually, and it worked very rapidly, which is why I recommend all of these things. AVRT, which is addictive voice recognition technique, which you can find in the book Rational Recovery by Jack Trimpey. Cognitive behavioral therapy is available, quite widely available, and there's so many resources these days online. You can just search on YouTube for so many resources for how to help with the mood disorders via methods such as cognitive behavioral therapy, and so many resources with our fitness journey as well. I really do think YouTube's a very good resource for a lot of this. That's what I did. I just looked up a lot of stuff on Google and YouTube, and it gave me all the information that I needed to know. I've learned more from YouTube than I have from most of the courses that I've done. Anyway, that's beside the point. So what I'm saying here is that I took a very direct approach to all of this recovery, and I found I was like, oh wow, this is amazing. I'm free. I found the methods that I need in order to recover, and I went for years with this very direct approach to fixing all of my issues and becoming happier and becoming more fulfilled and becoming healthier. And it worked. It worked. I got better. I got better. I did. I got better. I healed from so much of what was going on with me. I managed to stop drinking. I managed to lose weight, and I got to grips with the anxiety and the depression. It actually worked. However, as I was doing this, I became aware of a persistent shadow that just always seemed to be right at the back of my mind. It sometimes came in the form of doubt. It sometimes came in the form of a sort of a fear and a sort of a sapping of energy is probably the best way that I can think to describe it. So I came to notice sometimes I would have a day at work so I became a personal trainer and a fitness instructor. I'd have a day at work where everything went really well. And maybe I had some good comments came in from some of the members. People said they liked my fitness classes. Everyone was happy with me. The managers were happy with me. And I was like, okay, great. This is going well. And yet I just became aware that I wasn't feeling it. I was just it's like on the surface, on paper, everything was going so well, and I thought I should be so fulfilled and so happy right now. I mean, I'd done it. I'd done what I set out to do. I was living the life that I had set out to live. In many ways, I'd achieved what I set out to achieve. And yet there was just this strange background element of dissatisfaction, doubt, fear. And then there were a couple of incidents where suddenly, just out of nowhere, my mental health just took an absolute nosedive for seemingly, at the time, I thought for no reason at all. And I went through some periods of very, very dark periods where, although all of these direct methods that I'd used to recover were working so well, and yet there was just this sinking, this horror. I'm sure many people who listen to this podcast can relate to what I'm saying. That sinking feeling right into the pit of your stomach, the existential terror. There was something missing. I just became aware there was something I wasn't addressing. I didn't know what. I didn't know. At the time, I didn't quite understand what it was that I was missing because I was ticking off the checklist. I was like, what? But that's everything, isn't it? That's the alcoholism. That's the mental health, isn't it? Like, isn't that I'm doing it all. I'm doing everything that I should be doing. So, where is this coming from? And after one period of particularly bad mental health, I really sank into a very deep depression and anxious state again. I sought out therapy, counseling, which was actually very helpfully paid for by my employer. It's worth checking with your employer. Okay, if you haven't had any therapy or counseling, and cost is a barrier to you, it's worth checking with your employer. See if it's included in what employers provide, because they do these days. It's gotten a lot better. Employers may pay for your initial sessions because they want to keep you at work and they want you productive and happy and healthy and well. And things like anxiety and stress and things do cause a huge amount of absence from work. So a lot of employers these days do provide this in the contract. It's worth checking. It really is just worth checking if you want to take a look at it, but cost is a barrier. Try just see if your employer can help you out. You might be surprised. Okay, the world can be a lot kinder than you might think. And so my employer was very helpful, and they paid for some of the cost of this. And I saw a counselor, therapist, and she was very, very wise lady, very, very well read lady. And she pointed me towards some of the potential reasons why I may not quite what like I've done incredibly well and come very, very far in this journey. But she wanted to help me. I mean, one of the best analogies that she gave me was that it's like I'm running a marathon and doing very well, but I've got a stone in my shoe, and because of my mentality and my mindset, I'm trying to just complete the marathon with the stone in my shoe, but I'm not really aware of just how bad the issue is. And the stone in my shoe is starting to actually cause quite a lot of damage to my foot. So she said, what we're doing here in counseling and in therapy is actually just stop for a minute, just stop the marathon for a moment. And, let's get that stone out of the shoe so that you can enjoy running the rest of the marathon. So what was the stone? What was the stone in the shoe? What was the shadow? What was the thing that was continually at my back that seemed to be constantly sabotaging me finally completing this journey? Because that's exactly what it felt like. It felt like I was stuck on 99%. Have you ever had that when something is loading? Like you're trying to stream something and it's buffering or something, or you're trying to download something and it gets stuck on 99%? It's infuriating, and that's what it felt like. I was going about life, I felt like I'd 99% recovered, and yet I was stuck on 99%. So what is that 1%? What was the stone in the shoe? Well, I became aware that actually in childhood, I had suffered from a form of abuse. And the form of abuse was in the form of neglect, emotional neglect for a anxiety disorder that I had. And this type of pain, this type of trauma, and yes, this type of abuse, this type of neglect often goes unseen, unrecognized, particularly by the people who suffer from it, because it hides itself quite well. And so just to, this is, I don't want to turn this into a therapy session for me, but basically, I just want to give you my background so you know that I've had experience with this, and hopefully you can see where I'm coming from in my recovery. So I'm well aware that other people have, there's very severe forms of childhood trauma, and my heart goes out to you because I suffered from this sort of emotional neglect and this what's commonly termed CPTSD today, complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And whatever form of childhood trauma that you experienced or negative early experiences that you have experienced, my heart goes out to you because I know how rough it is. And everybody's going to have a very individual and different past and experience. And although in many ways we're all in this together because we're all trying to heal from our past, I also recognize just how individual it's going to be for you. So I'm just giving my individual. This is what happened with me. I had that severe anxiety, and I had no input. There was no framework for help. There was just a total absence. Nobody really cared. Nobody cared. And that is one of the most damaging things for a child, is to have no care, no compassion. It's bad enough when the child is otherwise healthy and well, but is receiving no care, no compassion, emotionally speaking. Children need reassurance. Children need comforting if they are distressed. Children need to be held and not just physically, but emotionally as well. And they need to be validated and heard and seen and respected and encouraged and nourished and nurtured. That's what they need. And it's if they don't receive that, even in the best of times, that's going to have an effect. It's going to have a negative impact on the rest of that person's life. If you add into that the child actually has a psychiatric disorder, and in my case it was an anxiety disorder that is not recognized, it is not seen, it is not heard, it is not validated, there's no care provided for that disorder, there is no framework of support in place. It's a lot better these days. These days they recognize when something's not right with a child emotionally much quicker, and they put a huge amount of support in place in order to support that child. And they do that for a reason. And the reason they do that is because it's necessary to support a child with a mood disorder, psychiatric disorder. Otherwise, they're going to develop a lot of problems later on. But I didn't have that. And I've long since gone past the point of why. I actually don't. I'm not too interested in why that happened. To be honest, I think it comes down more to incompetence, just incompetence and lack of knowledge of the adults around me. And yes, my parents, just straight up incompetence. Basically, I don't think it was malicious, but I just think it got missed. Partly because they're dealing with their own issues, and they just miss things because they don't see things. And so that's essentially what I came to understand. And this was through that therapy and through that counseling, this was a huge revelation for me. And it came with a lot of mixed emotions because obviously there's a huge sense of relief and hope and optimism because I go, oh, okay. So there was one last thing that I hadn't noticed. And you've got to look at the positives whenever we're going through this healing journey because what an opportunity. I go, wow, so it can be done. So I can hit that 100%. I can hit the 100% healing that I've been looking for. There was an element of my journey that I hadn't recognized. And so this actually filled me with a sense of hope and optimism because I say it all the time, awareness is key. Once you're aware of something, you can fix it. Once you're aware of something, you can heal it and strengthen it. So that's where that shadow was coming from. That's why there was this constant sort of niggling at the back of my mind, the shadow of doubt and fear, and the resurgence and the resurfacing of the anxiety and the depression. This is what it was stemming from. It also gives you a sense of horror and dread and despair because of the implications. The implications are massive, massive. And when you start looking back at it, you start realizing that this isn't the sort of thing that you can just heal from overnight. And I started to become very aware that I had my work cut out for me because there was so much that I had to go back through. So to take it back to the story of the knight fighting his way down through the cave, I realized I hadn't even entered the cave yet. And I was like, okay, well, here we go. Here we go. There was a line in one of the new Top Gun film that it really hit me emotionally. And here's one of the things I would recommend if you're in this is my first recommendation right here. If you're in the process of healing, if you're in the process of trying to recover and strengthen from whatever it is, and you feel like there might be elements of your healing journey that you're missing, look to the lines in films, the lines in songs, particular poems, anything in art that speaks to you and hits you on an emotional level because it's telling you something. And in the latest Top Gun film, there's a line one of them says when they're being tracked by these like ultra advanced fighter jets, and the guy, he turns to his co-pilot and he's like, we're not going to be able to outrun them this time. And the co-pilot looks at him and says, well, then it's a dogfight. And that struck me. It gives me goosebumps even saying it now because that's what it felt like. I felt like I was at the entrance of that cave and it was like There's no running from this now. There's no running from this now. It's a dogfight. And at some point in your healing journey, you have to just face it. You just have to face it. And that's where I was at. And it gives you a sense of dread and horror. And perhaps it knocked my confidence a little bit. I don't mind admitting that. It knocked my confidence because I thought I had it nailed. I thought I had it all squared away. I went into that therapy set, the first one. I was like, oh yeah, 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 yeah. Like, I've got this all sorted. I'm an expert in all of this. I was even giving it some of the spiritual talk at that time. I was like, yeah, but this whole thing about the past and childhood and stuff, but it's only ever the present moment. So I was like and I was, I cringe to think about it now, but I was giving it all the usual stuff that, yeah, like oh well, that was a long time ago, and it just is what it is and stuff like that. But now I look at it and I'm like, nah, that's not right. That's not right. And particularly because that you have to heal this, otherwise it's just the monsters will just keep coming. This is something, once you become aware of it, you can't ignore it now, because it explains so much. It explains so much about why things haven't worked out for you. And again, it's the sense of optimism as well as the sense of dread, because you start to realize, oh, that's why I always pick a certain type of relationship. That's why my relationships keep failing. That's why I can't get anywhere in work. That's why I keep getting stressed out when all the people around me don't seem to get stressed out. And yet when I have these certain situations and circumstances, I get stressed out. And it answers so many questions. You start to realize, right, this is why I get nervous in certain situations and circumstances. This is why I avoid certain things. This is why I shy away from certain things. And the implications are huge, huge, because you have to look back through your whole life and go, oh, wow. So that's why all of that was the way that it was. And there can be a huge sense of relief from that, because you realize, oh, okay, so it's not that there was anything wrong with me. I'm not defective. It's not brain chemistry. And by the way, this particularly annoys me, this idea that your mental health issues are like genetic or brain chemistry. That's kind of convenient, isn't it, really? Because that way, nobody has to face any accountability or responsibility for what they did to you, because they can just say, oh, well, it's just brain chemistry. So once again, oh, so it's my fault. I'm defective, right? I'm the one I've got a faulty brain, have I? Couldn't possibly be anything to do with the abuse or neglect, could it? Couldn't possibly be anything to do with that. It has to be my own brain chemistry. So that's just a particular one that annoys me to this day. It's not brain chemistry. It's not. So when you look back through all of that and realize that you've been suffering from something perhaps you weren't even aware that you were suffering from, it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of grace. It's going to take a lot of courage to really face this. And the important thing is to heal. That's the important thing. Now, on this journey, you are going to go through a lot of rage, a lot of anger. At times, you're going to go through a lot of hatred, because of not just the fact that you're bringing these feelings back up, these deep, old feelings, and these horrifying, terrifying feelings. You're bringing it all back up. You're facing that. You have to face that down. You also then have to face down the implications of why your life has gone the way that it's gone thus far, and also all of the areas that you were feeling a certain way about. Perhaps you were feeling guilty about a certain way that now you're actually feeling angry about. Now this is a huge switch to be going on in your mind. So there's a lot basically, is what I'm trying to say. It's very difficult to deal with. Now, what happens in childhood trauma, and I'll use my own experiences just as an example here, but obviously it's going to be different for everybody. But what happens is that because you're a child, when you're going through certain things, when either something's done to you or something's not done to you, so you're either yeah. What happens is because your mind can't cope with it and can't deal with it, your body and brain like stores the negative energy, and it tightens up, and you learn very maladaptive coping mechanisms, and you learn very unhealthy patterns of behavior and patterns of thinking in order to cope with the pain, because a child can't cope with that much. These are like adult emotions that the child it cannot quite deal with yet, and so it basically your child being very clever, it's a protective mechanism. It's a very powerful protective mechanism to just sort of bury the feeling, so that later on you can deal with it later when you have the strength and the power to deal with it. But your inner child holds on to it and stores it. So for me, I mean, some of my experiences are that I was so terrified and so horrified about going to school. Just I was overcome with terror and fear. And naturally, if I tried to tell anyone about this, they'd say, I just need to get on with it. I just need to grin and bear it. I just need to get over it, those sorts of things. And they didn't realize that I was having a panic attack. Like my heart was beating, I was sweating. But I didn't know that what the adults were telling me at that time was wrong. I thought they were right, because a child has to believe the adults are right. And it's crucial to understand, if you're going through this, you had no choice as a child. You have no mechanism for thinking that your parents or caregivers could be wrong. You have no mechanism for thinking that your teachers could be wrong. The adults have to be right. Why? Because they're providing your safety and your security. So you have to go along with their narrative. You have no choice as a child. You have no power. You don't have any power of your own yet. And so you had to go along with the narrative that they came up with. Their narrative is you just have to get over it. You just have to get on with it. You just have to toughen up, stiff upper lip, that sort of thing. And I believed that. So I was going through these panic attacks. I would go up into my room and I would clench my teeth and I would ball my fists up, and I would put the covers over my head and get my pillows and put those over my head. And I would cry, but I would try and cry silently so that nobody would hear me. And I thought that will help me to get the anxiety out of my system. Not that I knew what it was. I didn't even know what the word anxiety meant until I was 28. That says quite a lot. So that's what I would do, and I thought that was A, like normal, and B, I thought that was all my fault, obviously, and I just needed to like get on with things. And I thought I was just broken, and I was just weak. Looking back, actually, it's the adults that were broken and weak, because they weren't spending the emotional energy that they needed to spend in order to comfort and solace that child. They weren't spending the resources, the time, energy, care, attention, and connection that they needed to spend in order to comfort the child, in order to provide a framework of support, and to provide love for that child, so that that child feels safe, loved, nurtured, heard, seen, respected. That's what the child needs at that point. If I'd received that, if I'd received that, none of my problems would have ever happened. You'd have never heard from me. There'd be no Power of Now podcast. I'd just be a normal, healthy, functioning human being who never had to go through a transformation, who never had an addiction, who never had anxiety, depression, obesity. None of that would have ever happened if I'd been given the support, care, and attention that I needed from a young age. None of those problems would have ever happened. But it didn't go like that. It went a different way. And like I say, I'm long past sort of pointing fingers or blaming, because that's not helpful. it might be necessary at some point. If it helps you, then it helps you. And we should hold people accountable, absolutely. And we should understand where other people have failed. And we, although just on that subject, as I've come to it, whether you should, there's a lot of anger and rage that's inevitably going to come up. But I would say, don't forgive anyone until you're ready. There's this huge rush and pressure on people to forgive, forgive and forget, forgive and forget. Again, it's very convenient, that, isn't it? Very convenient for everyone else. You don't have to, not until you're ready, and maybe you never will be ready. I'm dealing with something we could say fairly mild to moderate, really, in terms of on the scale of bad things that happen in people's childhood. Mine's probably relatively mild to moderate, so it might not be quite so hard for me to come to that place of understanding and forgiveness. But for someone else who suffered something more severe, more extreme, then you know, uh, that I would say don't feel pressured into forgiving people. Not until you're ready, okay? Because if we're pressuring people into forgiving, it's just the same old pattern, the same old blame game, the same old victim blaming, basically. So anyway, that's what happened in terms of. So I was basically, by doing that, by clenching up and tightening up, I was burying my feelings, and I was internalizing all of those feelings. I was internalizing that anxiety, although I don't really like the term internalizing either, because again, that blames the child. It's like, you silly child, you shouldn't have internalized it. That's what it feels like to your inner child. What actually happened is the adults externalized their incompetence into me. They externalized their emotional laziness into me. Most likely because they're just incompetent, they didn't know any better, whatever. So I'd buried that, held on to it, and I carried a lot of guilt and a lot of shame about this, because this resurfaced many times. It wasn't just about school, it was also about going on holidays, going to after school activities like scouts. And I would often feel just this surge that came up. It like came up in my stomach. It felt like being sick, it felt like butterflies, it felt like heart racing, sweating, clenching my teeth. And at times this happened at school, okay, when I was at year 7, moving to this sort of middle school, and I was crying my eyes out. My friends can remember this. Like, for the first half of year 7, I was crying my eyes out all the time. On the way to school, I could barely function. I could barely function at school. They just always sent me to the medical room and said, whatever. I often said I had a headache, that to explain why I was crying, but actually I was terrified because I got some attention if I said I had a headache. The adults could understand it if I said I had a headache, but they didn't understand it if I was crying and said, I don't know, I just feel awful. I just feel awful. These days, that wouldn't happen, all right? These days, if they saw a child, they would recognize that something's not right there. That would flag up as something called safeguarding. They would say, right, this child is visibly upset often and with no real discernible cause for it. These days that would flag up as this needs to be investigated. But back in those days, this would be late 90s. Although it was beginning, they were beginning to recognize this a bit more. There was no system in place. And so I got kind of dismissed. And I guess I was let down by the system a little bit there. But I didn't know any of this back in the day. So I carried a lot of guilt and shame about this because it's humiliating. It's humiliating for a young boy to be crying his eyes out on the way to school, at school, friends all looking at me like, what on earth is wrong with you? Teachers like, what on earth is wrong with you? And that's always the feeling. It's like, I just felt terrible. I felt terrible about myself. I felt terrible I was interrupting things. I felt terrified that I wasn't able to be normal. I was desperate to be normal, and yet I couldn't do it. I know now I was suffering from anxiety, quite severe anxiety, panic attacks regularly, and nobody was helping. But I didn't know that was wrong, because a child has to think the adults know what they're doing. And it's only later on you look back, when you become an adult yourself and you realize, I don't know what I'm doing. You realize no one's actually running the show, no one's actually in charge. Anyway, so I just wanted to explain that's my background with childhood trauma. And this is traumatic for a child. You might think, well, it's just an anxiety disorder. I wasn't in any physical danger. So how is this traumatic? Well, it's the terror. When you have anxiety, when you have these anxiety attacks, your body is acting as if it is in mortal danger. Your body is acting as if your life is threatened. That's what is happening. That's what the anxiety response is. It's a response to a threat. And so I was very young, and I was enduring prolonged periods of time in which my body felt like it was in a mortal danger. And that's traumatic for the body and the brain. Now, it's not like singular, intense moments of threat like you would get with combat PTSD if people have experienced sort of periods of extreme violence, things like that. It's more of a prolonged exposure to that very intense anxiety. And that resulted in a complex post traumatic stress disorder, sometimes called childhood post traumatic stress disorder, partly because I had no way of releasing that trauma. And this is going to be very important as we come into the healing stage. It's about releasing that pent up, that stored traumatic energy, negative, painful energy that stores within the body. It stores within the limbic system. It's not just a cognitive thing, it's in your nervous system and it's in your limbic system, deep, 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 deeply laid down. So, because I'd buried and held onto and had no way of releasing this, it was stored in my body and it manifested as a constant background sense of unease, worry, and tension. Even when I thought I was feeling okay, I thought I was feeling fine, but there was still this tension, this fear, and this tension that was always there in me. And the slightest trigger for anything worrying or threatening that happened, my body reacted as though it just goes straight into fight or flight. It still does it to this day, just immediately triggers into fight or flight. When most people, if people have had healthy backgrounds and have grown up without anxiety disorders and have grown up without PTSD, this trigger doesn't happen. Then they don't have huge stress reactions to minor things. It just doesn't rise up, but it does in me. So that's my background with childhood trauma and negative early experiences. There's more, but that's the part I just wanted to talk about, because I'd be willing to bet more people can relate to that. Mine was probably quite dramatic, but you might have had one that's a little bit more subtle. It might not be quite as severe as that. There might not be the tears or the overt reaction, but I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people have internalized certain negative experiences thinking it was your fault, thinking you did something wrong, or thinking that you're somehow defective. I would invite you to re examine that and think, where were the adults at during that time? Any particularly painful memories you have, whether you were terrified, humiliated, shamed, mocked, you felt like you couldn't cope, you felt like you didn't have the resources, you felt like you couldn't perform the task properly that was being asked of you. Just revisit that experience. It can be very painful to do this, but revisit it and instead ask, what were the adults doing? What were they playing at? Why did nobody recognize that? Turn it around. Turn it on them. Turn it on them. Turn it on the people who should have helped you. Turn it around onto the people who should have been there for you. They're willing to blame you, right? Everyone's willing to point the finger at the child and say, you need to get on with it. You need to get a grip. You need to man up, whatever it is. Or, so when it's boys, it's man up. When it's with girls, it's like, oh, stop being a silly girl. Like, you've got your silly female emotions. Both boys and girls get it. It's just in different forms. Boys get told to man up, boys don't cry, sort of thing, and girls get told, oh, don't be a silly girl, like that's just female emotions, sort of thing. You're being overly emotional. It's ridiculous. We shouldn't we shouldn't put our kids through this sort of stuff. So turn it around, and say those things that you've internalized were externalized into you and you buried and you feel a lot of guilt and shame about. Turn it around and say, well, where were the adults? Why were the adults so incompetent? Why did they not recognize that a child was suffering? How could they not see that a child was suffering? It's not your fault. It's not your fault. The adults should have been there. It's not on the child. It's not on a child to have adult coping mechanisms. You can't expect that of a child. They're still developing. A child is still growing. A child is still learning. And yet, toxic and incompetent adults expect children to have an adult framework of coping mechanisms and coping strategies and resilience and strength and resources. How? How is a child supposed to have that? So that's what I would suggest. And look, if you are somebody who suffers from anxiety, depression, things of that nature, and yet you still have the belief, oh, but my childhood was fine, I would just say, just double check that. Just go back through that again and just say, well, what was all of it great? All of it? Were there some incidents and some periods of time that were less than great, less than ideal? Maybe some parts weren't so fantastic. And a good test for this, a fantastic resource on YouTube, is Patrick Tiahan. I highly recommend him. And he was saying a good test for this is, would you want your child to go through the same childhood that you went through? And if the answer is no, I would take a look at that, examine that, because, well, why not? If your childhood was great, why wouldn't you want your child to go through exactly the same one? Because there's probably some things that you would change. And that's what I would recommend anyway. If you do suffer from the sort of mood disorders, psychiatric disorders, but you're still under the belief that, oh, yeah, but my childhood was great, my parents were great, my school was great, everything's fine, everything's fantastic. That's a trauma response in itself, by the way. I would just check it out, because maybe it wasn't all fantastic. Now, how does this then manifest throughout somebody's life, and why does it cause a problem? Why does it cause dysfunction? So, for me, because of what I went through at school, and this was very humiliating, and it made me feel very ashamed, and it made me, I just had a very negative kind of self image moving forwards in school. And once I'd eventually, the panic attacks and the anxiety subsided enough that I was functional, I kind of felt like I needed to save face, and I needed to kind of redeem myself and become popular, because I felt like I was like the lowest of the low on the social ladder because of my anxiety. And so I became this like class clown. And to this day, all my like normal response whenever I meet anyone or I'm in a friendship group, I'm always trying to make people laugh, because I came to believe, right, if people are laughing at my jokes, then they must like me. And that's kind of the response. And I went for many years, just that was my default method of socializing, is just to try and make people laugh. And I became a bit of a clown. And the thing about being a clown is half the time people are laughing with you and half the time people are laughing at you. And because I was clowning around so much, I was interrupting class a lot. I'm not proud of it. I'm not proud of it at all. And interrupted class and got into trouble with school and things like that. So that's like one of the things that kind of manifested. And I became very much like a people pleaser. I was desperate for people to like me. And this is very common in people who have experienced some form of difficulty in their early life, is this desperation to be liked, a desperation to be accepted, a desperation to be included. And there's this horrifying fear of rejection that builds up, which makes you very fragile. It makes you very fragile and very vulnerable. It makes you vulnerable to manipulation. It makes you vulnerable to the narcissists and the manipulators and the sociopaths out there, because they can sense it. They can sense your need to be liked. They can sense your need to be validated and accepted, and people will exploit it. They will. Uh, Also, obviously, as I was sort of growing up, I just had this resurgence of depression and anxiety all the time. It just kept coming up, and I just shut myself away quite a lot. I wasn't able to function a great deal throughout university. It kept manifesting, and sadly, it always makes me sad to think about. But I remember the first time I took a drink of alcohol, I felt normal for the first time, probably in my entire life. And looking back now, I can see that because alcohol is a chemical nervous system depressant, it was suppressing my agitated nervous system response. And that's why I suddenly felt normal when I drank, because I was suddenly feeling the nervous system state of resting that most people feel all the time. And so that's where my addiction got started, essentially. It was a sort of self medication for anxiety. Now, this is tricky to talk about because when you're recovering from alcoholism, you have to take full accountability and full responsibility for your behaviors and action, or you will not recover. So, although I can look back and say, yes, my anxiety played a part in me getting addicted, in order to recover, I had to understand that it was still my choice to drink. You have to understand that. It's tough. It's a difficult nuance to get your head around, but it's absolutely necessary. If you struggle with addiction, you have to stop the addiction and then heal from the past. It doesn't work the other way around. In my experience, it just doesn't. You have to you have to drop the anesthetic in order to know where the pain is. So in my experience, although I can look back now and say, yes, my my CPTSD probably led to my addiction, or played, it was a factor in me becoming addicted, it wasn't the cause of my addiction, because addiction is just a behavior, and a behavior can stop at any moment. A lot of people stay addicted to substances and behaviors because they think, uh, if I'm going to sort this out first, I need to heal from what I went through as a child. It doesn't work like that. It works the other way around. It's a good thing to heal from what you went through as a child, and it would be a good idea if you have been addicted. There's probably something less than ideal that happened in your early life. But my recommendation is drop the anesthetic so that you know where it hurts. And there's no way I could have done any of my inner work, my healing from trauma, without first ceasing the addiction. Cease the addiction first. But yeah, the hyper agitated nervous system state and the feeling of dysphoria, the horrible feeling that was soothed and alleviated by the alcohol, you can see how it probably leads to a proclivity to addiction. Obviously, the overeating. So overeating is the most common self medication that we use, and it seems it's woefully unrecognized. A lot of people just don't recognize this. They're in peril because it's become so culturally acceptable. It's like just comfort eating. It's like it's not good for you. It's not, and that's what led to my obesity and obviously my anxiety and depression throughout the majority of my early adult life. So that's how this manifests later on in life. And coming to grips with this and gaining this knowledge and understanding has helped me a huge amount to stay healthy and well, to stay recovered from alcohol, to keep the weight off, and to manage my anxiety, depression, stress levels, all of that sort of stuff. So it's absolutely worth taking a look at. And in this recovery, when you're looking at the childhood stuff, I've got to say, this has been the hardest thing of all. It's been real rough. You would think, looking at my journey and looking at my story, you would think, wow, to cease an alcohol addiction of 20 cans of cider a day, to go through that withdrawal withdrawal syndrome many times. It almost killed me a few times. It really did. I went through delirium tremens. I was having fits, everything. To recover from that, to do enough physical training and dieting to go from type 2 obese, 137 kilograms down to 85 kilograms, to lose that much weight and to keep that weight off, to battle through the anxiety and depression, to retrain in a career into health and fitness. You would think all of that is the really difficult and tough part, and the therapy was probably the easy part, the nice part. But actually, nah. Therapy is hard work, very, very hard work, and I can't sugarcoat it. It's tough. It's tough. It's of everything I've gone through, and I've been through quite a bit on this recovery journey, dealing with the dealing with the dealing with revisiting those painful early experiences and healing from them, not just revisiting them, but actually now doing the work in order to heal from them. It takes something out of you. And so I want to say this, not to scare anyone or put anyone off, but to show a bit of solidarity. If you're finding it tough, I am with you 100%. And a lot of people are with you, because it's nails, nails. It's rough. And I've found it harder work than any workout I've ever done, any run that I've ever been on, any alcohol withdrawal I've ever been through, any deep, hardcore, long meditation I've ever done, any challenge I've ever done, my cold water immersion challenges, anything like that is pales in insignificance compared to the pain of revisiting a traumatic childhood memory. Why? Because there is nothing worse on earth. True suffering is witnessing the suffering of a child. That is the most painful experience on earth. It's then made even more acute and even more painful when the child that is suffering is you. You are revisiting your inner child. What is resurfacing is your inner child. All of these memories and physical reactions come back to the surface, and you have to re-feel the emotions and the situations that you have buried, that you buried for a good reason. You buried these feelings, you buried these sensations, you buried the physical memory as well. You buried these things because it was too painful. And now you have to bring it back up to the surface. On top of that, so you have the acutely painful memory itself, you're now also trying to, you have to see this now from a fresh perspective. Previously, you'd built up this whole protective mechanism, which is where the ego begins, this whole protective mechanism that somehow compartmentalizes, buries, and categorizes the pain into something that's acceptable to the child, which is unhelpful and most likely not the right way of looking at things. So often the child blames themselves. Even in ridiculous circumstances, the child will think it's their fault they got hit. The child will think it's their fault they got slapped, or their fault that they got locked in a coal shed for 2 weeks. And the child will think, yeah, that's and carry that into adulthood. Will think, yeah, that was my fault. I deserved that. No, you didn't deserve that. Of course you didn't deserve that. And so now we have to not only revisit the memory, but then apply this new framework of understanding onto that memory, which is coming from a completely new place. The old framework, the tools that you're using, that you usually use to navigate through life and to operate through life, your attitudes, opinions, beliefs, everything about life now no longer works. It no longer works because all of that, all of your attitudes, opinions, ideas, beliefs, everything that you've used up to this point was informed by this traumatic experience early in your life. And now we have to get rid of that because we know it's not helpful. We know it doesn't work. We know that it's a trauma response in itself. And now we're bringing new knowledge to the situation. So we're having to use tools that we're unfamiliar with. That's probably the best way to describe it. You're using tools that you're not experienced with. And these could be the tools of using the techniques that the therapist has taught you, using the techniques that the meditation coaches and teachers have taught you, using the what your friends, that like-minded friends, which is a really powerful thing in recovery, that they've taught you, and the people that you now trust and love that they've taught you. You're having to apply these new tools, these tools that you're unfamiliar with. And it's like starting the first day, of a new job. You're always going to be nervous starting the new day of a new job because you don't know what you're doing yet. You haven't learned yet. And it's not only that, it's not only that you're unfamiliar with the tools and the framework and this new language and this new knowledge, but you're also using those new tools to try and face something unbelievably painful. So I'm just trying to show some solidarity here. That's why it floors you. It absolutely knocks you for six, because going through this as well, it will leave you drained. It will leave you utterly exhausted. It will leave you confused and tired and angry and frustrated. And you will be on this emotional roller coaster whilst you go through this process. And life around you doesn't stop. Life around you doesn't go anywhere. There's still all the pressures of work and everything. There's still all the family pressures and life pressures and all of that. And nobody will really know that you're dealing with absolute hell on earth internally. And I mean, often you might still be in contact with the very same people that caused the problem in the first place. Now you try navigating that, right? It's exhausting, absolutely exhausting. And I think it needs to be a bit more recognized in our culture when people are going through therapy that they're not always going to be at their best at work. There's so many things that we understand. Say if somebody's like suffered a serious loss and is grieving, we understand. And they come into work and they look really low and they're like not exactly jumping for joy every second. People give them we give them a pass, don't we? For quite some time. That could last for years, and we understand, okay, they've suffered a loss. All right, let's have some compassion. But you don't find that same thing if somebody's going through therapy, if somebody's healing, if somebody's going through that sort of trauma recovery. You don't find as much sympathy for that because, well, people just don't get it yet. It's getting better though. So so I just wanted to show some solidarity that this is hard work and it's really rough. But I'm going to say, stick with it. Stick with it, because this is the dark night of the soul. You are questioning everything, and your whole framework of life and belief is falling away, and the new way of living hasn't yet started. So you're just lost. You're confused. You're scrabbling around in the dark. You haven't quite figured things out yet. To go to the story of the knight in the cave, before that knight realized that it was his own inner child that was causing all of the monsters in the first place. He was just fighting around in the dark, in the caves, just defeating horrifying monster after monster. And that's what it feels like, the dark night of the soul. And that's what's happening. That's what's happening. So the new framework of life hasn't started yet. You haven't felt the benefits of healing yet. You're just feeling the exhaustion and the pain of healing without yet feeling the promise and the hope. But stay strong, because it's always darkest before the dawn, always. And going through the dark night of the soul, it's rough. But you just know on some level, on the deepest level, you just know that this is the right thing to do. And the good news here, once you've started this process, it's irreversible. It's irreversible. You're going to go through it now. Once you've opened the floodgates, you can't shut them again. It's like all that old phrase of once the cat is out the bag. Now imagine that. We use that phrase a lot, and so it loses its meaning. But imagine it. You've got a cat tied up in a bag, and it's like scratching around and clawing its way out. But you've got it safely, securely in the bag, even though it's scratching and causing havoc in there. If you open that bag and the cat gets out, it's out. There is no way you're putting that cat back in that bag. And that's why it's a good idea. Just rip the Band-Aid off and just go into it, because once this process starts, it won't stop. And that's good. That's good. That's what we want. We need to heal this. We need to heal the root cause of the wound. The wound. That's what we need to heal. Because often what we're dealing with in life is the symptoms. We're dealing with the symptoms and we're not curing the disease. Let's cure the disease, the dis-ease, the unease that's at your heart. Let's cure it. Let's heal it so that these monsters don't keep resurfacing, that these monsters don't keep reappearing, because that's what these monsters in your life are. And if you keep finding you're having the same relationship problems, you're feeling the usual low self-esteem, low confidence, self-doubt, constant self-sabotage, constant fear, dread, no sense of energy, no hope, and the same problems keep resurfacing, what it is this monster keeps resurfacing in your life. And we need to go right down into the depth of the cave, find and rescue that inner child. Because that's what that inner child needs, is rescuing. The inner child who still lives within you needs a safe, secure, well-resourced adult to come along and say, I got you. Don't worry. I'll protect you. I'll protect you. I have the resources. I have the strength. I have the knowledge, and I'm going to keep you safe, happy, healthy, and well. And one of the methods for healing that you can do is reassure your inner child. You can do meditations on this. Sit as though your inner child is sat with you and just keep reassure that child. It's okay. You are safe now. You are safe. You will be protected. You will be loved. You are under my protection now. I won't let any harm come to you. You are marvelous. You are wonderful. We love you. You are loved. People enjoy being around you. You are a delight. You are not a burden. You are a good thing. We are glad that you are here. We are happy. I am happy that you are here. And I'm going to love and nurture and nourish you, and I will not let any harm come to you. That's what the inner child needs to hear, and probably has never heard. Never. Especially if you've had very incompetent caregivers, incompetent parents, incompetent teachers. That nervousness and anxiety probably stemmed from the fact that you realized that these people don't know what they're doing. And so there's just this background level of nervousness because at any moment you have to step up and be the adult, because the adults around you are so emotionally immature that they are utterly incapable of being adults. So a lot of children end up in that parentified role because they have to step up and be adults before they're adults. It should never happen. A child shouldn't have to be in the role of an adult. So I've just spoke at length there. I could go on, but that's as much as just time constraints, really. So that's a brief overview of the general area that we're dealing with here. Now, obviously, that's just my experiences. It's going to be different for everybody, and whatever your experience with this phenomena is, childhood trauma, negative early experiences, you got to validate it. And I would say pay attention to how it felt for that child, because everyone around you will try and dismiss it and say it wasn't that big a deal. But don't listen to any external voice. You need to listen to the inner voice. You need to listen to the inner child, because the inner child is the authority on what the inner child has experienced. And go to the experience itself. It might not look like much from the outside world. And one of the things that makes this journey so difficult is this cultural dismissal of childhood pain, and people dismiss this because they're afraid to look at their own childhoods. Okay, that's why people dismiss it, and people are so quick to say, "Oh, you just need to forgive and forget. Oh, it was a long time ago. Oh, you just need to get on with it." People say that because that's the coping mechanism that they've adopted that helps them to ignore their own pain, ignore their own suffering. And they want to put that on you because people don't like it when you start taking a look at these things and start talking about these things because it triggers something within them. Okay. So I would say be careful who you talk to about this sort of stuff because people are very quick to dismiss it, but don't listen to anyone else. Listen to your own inner child, your own inner voice. Whatever your inner child experienced, whatever you experienced is what you experienced. That's what's important. So, what happens here on the spiritual path? What happens when we're engaged in meditation and we're finally finding some inner peace? We have to reconcile what's happening here, because if it's only ever the present moment, and that's true, there is no such thing as the past. Rather, there is no solid, tangible location as the past. There's no going back to the past now. And there's no such thing as the future. It's only ever now. And in meditation, this begins to give us this huge sense of inner peace and inner relief. And yet, because the inner child, with all of the trauma and pain, is still stored within the nervous system and within the physical body, the pain of those experiences can still manifest within the present moment. Now, it's a well-recognized phenomena that sometimes in meditation, because your ego drops, because your narrative drops, because the story disappears, often repressed memories come to the surface. And that's just a fair warning that I'm trying to give you. Repressed memories that you have long since tried to forget. Your body and mind will forget certain memories because they were just too painful to deal with at the time. But in meditation, what happens is we come into a very safe, very secure space for the body and mind. We come into the infinite universal consciousness, which is the light of pure awareness, and nothing can hide from the light of pure awareness. Nothing hides from the light of pure awareness, the good and the bad, the positive and the negative, the yin and the yang. Nothing can hide from the light of pure awareness. And so, as we come into that meditation, as we come into finding that inner peace, that sense of tranquility and security, finally, the inner child feels safe. Safe enough to start saying, to start raising a hand and saying, "Hi, I'm here. And is it safe to come out now?" Just as the child at the bottom of the cave was crying and turns around and wants to know, am I in trouble? Am I in trouble? Am I still in danger? Am I still a problem for everyone, or am I allowed to come out now? This is what happens in meditation. Your inner child will come out and say, is it safe to come out yet? And with this, with the inner child doing this, what happens is all of those old memories and all of those old feelings come right back up to the surface. So this is the power of now what? Overcoming awakening problems. This is one awakening problem. The emotional turmoil that inevitably results from this. There's no getting around it. There's no getting around it. But we have to understand that pain is not a problem in itself. It's unpleasant. We'd rather it wasn't there. But do not mistake the absence of pain for health. What we need is to heal. And to heal means to become whole. The word heal and the word whole have their same etymological root. They have the same core word. We want to become whole. We want to heal. Sometimes you've got to go through a bit of pain. And by a bit of pain, I mean a lot of pain. We have to allow this inner child to have the space in order to be seen, to finally be heard, to finally be loved, nourished, supported, encouraged, helped. And meditation provides this ground, provides this space, but it's going to come with a lot of pain. It gives us a clue as to why the adults around you didn't want to acknowledge or help you with the pain that you experienced as a child. Because this is when your inner child comes up and says, "Hey, I've got this, there's this horrifying thing that happened to me." Your initial reaction is, "Oh, no, we can't deal with that right now. I've got too much on. I've got to go to work. I can't deal with this right now. I've got stuff to do. I can't deal with what you're saying." You understand now, this is why the adults are the way they are. They don't want to acknowledge the pain because it's painful. But we're here now, and it's time to give space and energy and attention to this pain. That's the only way that we're going to be able to fully heal and move forwards. Turn the light of awareness towards it, because we can't deal with the problem unless we know what we're dealing with. And I've used the analogy before of, if you've got a dirty room, but the light is off, you don't even know that it's dirty. You don't even know that it's untidy and messy. You just keep bumping around in the dark, stubbing your toe on things. Once you turn the light on, it's not nice to see just how untidy and dirty the room is, but that light is necessary in order to clean. And so let's do this. Let's feel the pain. By turning the awareness to the pain, it is healing in itself. So to reconcile this paradox of, but if the past doesn't exist, how do we heal from it? It's not a sense of saying these experiences didn't happen. That doesn't help. That further dismisses the child's pain, the inner child's pain. By saying, "Oh, it just never happened. There's nobody here. There's nothing to do." There's a method of spirituality that can be very dismissive of that inner pain. That's the last thing we want to do. We don't want to dismiss the child's pain, because that's what caused the problem in the first place. We're not trying to dismiss what happened. That's what causes the problems. Instead, we're recognizing and understanding. But how to reconcile the paradox? But if it's only ever the present moment, how did the past happen? It's that the past is still happening. It's all happening in one moment. It's all happening in the eternal, infinite now. And so these negative childhood experiences are still happening. It's not that they happened to a character in the past. It's that they happen now. Your inner child is still experiencing the pain. Now, that might sound horrifying, and it is, but it should also give you hope. Because if it's happening now, we can deal with it now. If it's happening in the now, we can deal with it now. And once it's dealt with and healed, when that inner child is satisfied with the resolution, it will be as though it never happened. That's how it will feel. Because there's no past and there's no future. We can reconcile the experience that's happening now, once it's seen, understood, healed, and the proper framework has been put in place, the proper support and love that has been genuinely applied to the situation, then it will be as though it never happened. And prevention is better than cure, right? Your inner child will be safe with you. Your inner child needs to feel happy and safe that you will always acknowledge, validate, and respect what that inner child went through. You need to be your own safe, well-resourced adult. That's what needs to happen. It's called reparenting, and that's what needs to happen. You need to be the love that you never got. That's what you need to be in order to heal. And once that love is there, because here's the thing about love, it's ever present. It's always there. You would not ignore a child suffering. You wouldn't. You would drop everything. You would take time off work. You would take time away from relationships. You would take time, if your child was suffering, you would drop everything to support that child. Why? Because that's the most important thing, to stop a child from suffering. That's what we need to do. So to reconcile the paradox, it's to understand that this pain is still happening now. It can be healed in the present. You can't heal the past. You can't heal the past. You can only heal the now, because the past isn't really real. It's not a place. It's not a thing. What is real and what is a thing is the pain. That's what needs to be seen. So the other thing that happens in meditation is, as you build up your resilience, as you build up your emotional strength and your emotional resources, your mind always brings more. It's like the stronger you get. So the phrase is new levels bring new devils. And that's very real. I've said before, goblins don't attack angels. All right. Demons attack angels. The stronger you get, the more resourced and resilient you get, the worse memories are going to arise. I'm sorry to tell you this, but that's just the way it is, because your mind will only bring to the surface things that you're ready to deal with. And the stronger you get, the deeper the pain that needs to be resolved will come to the surface. So that's the awakening problem right here, is, why do I feel worse the more I meditate? Why do I feel, it's like, am I getting better? Is this meditation even helping me? I actually feel like, there's even more dark thoughts. There's even more dark memories. Well, that's why. It's because you're finally giving light. You've turned the light on and you've seen how messy the room is. Now, as to solutions and resolutions, it's going to be different for everyone, depending on your particular experiences, depending on how you are as a person, your individual temperament, your individual knowledge, experience, and skills. It's going to be very different for everyone. But I can give my advice and guidance as it comes to the meditation aspects of how to deepen your recovery and healing in this. I'm going to give my two kind of the tools that you can use in meditation that are sort of on the ground level, like, on the front lines, so to speak. So when you're in meditation and these emotions come up, these are the tools and resources you can use to ensure that you are using your meditative practice to heal. So I'm going to give my two top tips on that, my go-to methods anyway, and then I will end with my final, the ultimate resolution to all of this. Now, every technique, every method is fantastic, as long as we're healing and growing and moving forwards and strengthening, and we are healing. It's all good. It's all good. Every path works. Every path works. You have to understand this on this journey. There's no one right answer. Every path is good. Whatever path you're on, start where you are. Use what you have and do what you can. Every path works. Eventually, we all get to the top of the mountain, and that's what I'll end with, how to get to the top of the mountain. But my first two kind of methods and techniques that I use in meditation when these very dark, very painful things come up is, firstly, to drop the story. And this is crucially important. So this is the path of away. This is the path of, when the pain is there, we acknowledge the pain. We know the pain is there. The sensation is there. What we can do in meditation is drop the images, the words, and the people that flood your mind. Because what starts to happen when we have this core wound, this core pain, deep, deep, deep pain right in the soul. It goes deeper than the body and mind. It's in the soul, that with this deep pain, and what rises to the surface in the mind is chaos. We have images, we have words, we have stories, we have people, places. All of these events swirl around and creates this mind storm. And in meditation, Drop the story, drop the narrative, and bring yourself fully into the here and now. Just now. Don't relive the memory. Memory won't help you now. Don't relive the memory. Don't attach a story. Don't attach a narrative. Just drop all of that away, and that will alleviate some of the turmoil. It will alleviate some of the chaos. And believe me, I've been through this so many times. All of these stories, and you relive the memory and you get furiously angry, and it's going to interrupt your meditation. You get very depressed, very sorrowful. You feel all of this regret. You can't, but I mean, you just think, wow, all that time, all those years wasted, all of those years I lost to depression, to addiction, all of that, all of this comes up, all of the embarrassment, the guilt, everything. In the here and now, in the present moment, ask yourself, where is the story now? Where is it now? Where is the past now? Where are the people now? Where is the memory now? It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. It's gone. It's just a thought. It's a temporary, fleeting, momentary thought, and don't engage. So the first thing I recommend is away, away, away. Just drop the narrative. And in order to really do this, to fully do this, if you're serious about the meditative spiritual path, if you're serious about this, you have to drop your own ego. Drop your own name, drop your own age, drop your job, drop your numbers, drop your bank account, your salary, phone number, address, everything. Just drop it. Let it all go. We have to drop this ego, because it's the story and narrative that's built up around the pain. By dropping it, we uncover the raw feeling itself, the emotion itself. So in meditation, in the present moment, simply remain as pure, open, empty awareness. Awareness itself doesn't suffer from the emotion. Awareness itself doesn't suffer pain. It's aware of pain, but it doesn't suffer pain. Crucial to understand. So drop the narrative, and that's the path of away. Don't engage with any memory. Don't engage with any story. You won't fix the story now. You won't. The story only exists in your head. It doesn't exist in the same way in anyone else's head. They all have a different story. Your story is personal to you. Drop it and it disappears. And what you are left with is the raw seed of pain. So once we've done that, drop the narrative and story, and recognized our true nature as the infinite awareness, the universal conscious awareness, now we are free to practice towards. We've done the away, now we return. Return to the feeling. Return to the pain. Without the narrative now. Without the story, no words, just return to the pain and feel it. Feel it. Finally feel it. Why? Because you are now strong enough. You're an adult now, with all of the resources, with all of the knowledge, skills, experience, spiritual resilience. Okay? The angels themselves are with you. I bless you for this today. I bless you for this. I bless you for this. I send angels to you for this. The angels are with you on this path. Go towards the feeling. Go towards the feeling. The angels are with you here. This is the healing, to fully feel it's okay. It's okay. What is the sensation itself? In the awareness, no story now, no narrative. What is the feeling? It's just a sensation. Feel it in the body. It's just a sensation. That's it. That's it. That's all it is. You are strong enough to face this now. And now you can feel it as an adult. It's not so bad. Not anymore. It used to be, but it's not now. You can bear it now. This is it. That's it. The thing you were running from, the thing you were afraid from. This is it. This is it. That's it. Right there, right now, in this present moment. This present moment, allow yourself to finally fully feel the very worst of the whole thing. Let it come up. Let it come up. It's okay. Let it come up. Let it be felt. Let it be seen. Now, is it so bad? That's all it is. That's it. This is it now. That's as bad as it's ever going to get. That's as bad as it's ever going to get. It's never ever going to be worse than that. This is it. This is the final barrier. This is the final gate. It doesn't get any worse than healing from childhood trauma. This is the end boss, the final monster. And it is the child. And the child's name is I'm scared. And just allow the space for this feeling as infinite universal consciousness, the knight that arrives in shining armor with the sword and the shield and says, don't worry, I'm here now. We're going to get you out of here. Awareness itself does not suffer pain. And you are this awareness always. Always. That's never going to change. It's never not going to be now. It's always going to be now. It's always going to be the present moment. Always. It can't not be now. It's always now. And you are always going to be aware of now. You are always going to be the awareness of now. So, you are safe. You are safe. Ultimately, an emotion is just an emotion. A feeling is just a feeling. The child could not bear it. When you were a child, you could not bear that feeling. It was too much. Of course it was. You were a child. Of course it hurt. Of course it was too much to bear. Of course you had to bury it. You clever thing. You clever thing. You remarkably resilient, creative little child. You found a way to bury the pain. How clever is that? You had no other resources. You did what you had to do to survive. You remarkable, clever, intelligent, compassionate, loving being that you are. You found a way to survive. And you buried all of that pain deep within your own nervous system so that later, when you grew in strength and power and resilience, you could dig that back up and deal with it then. And here we are. You have found what the inner child buried. Now you are the adult. You are the infinite universal awareness that can bear the pain. Open it up. Let it out. Let it out. We let it out by feeling it, by sacrificing our comfort in the moment. You would sacrifice anything for your child. You would sacrifice anything. And so practice this same sacrifice, but for yourself. Sacrifice your comfort in the moment. Sacrifice your peace in the moment to endure, to stand in front of the child and take the bullet. Take the bullet. Take the bullet for the kid. Take the bullet for the child, for that little boy, that little girl that couldn't cope. Take the bullet. It's okay. You can face it now. So this is towards, the path of towards. Face it. Feel it, feel it, feel it. And know on a deep, deep level, awareness, consciousness can take it all. The angels are with you. Do it. Do it. All the way. All the way. This is how we heal. Let go of any narrative, story, anything that you've had to put in place to protect yourself is now gone. Just feel the emotion, and then we are healed. In that light. With this new understanding, you are free. Free to feel, and now no longer having to exist within a delusional narrative in which you live your life in order to protect that pain, in order to not feel that pain. You are now free. There's no need for any more addictions. There's no need for overeating. There's no need for any of your negative habits anymore because you know you are safe from pain. You can go away or towards, either way. You are safe and fine. A feeling is just a feeling. With this deep, dark feeling given the light, it may take some time. It might, I will have to concede this here. I have to concede this. That it's going to take a few, it's like if you have an item of clothing that is stained, it doesn't come out in one wash. You might have to wash it 3, 4, 5 times until that stain is gone. And maybe there's always going to be a very faint residue, but that's all right. That's okay. Even the faint residue, if you have like a white t-shirt with a tiny faint residue of coffee stain, it doesn't stop being a white t-shirt, does it? It's still a white t-shirt. It's just a fading stain, that's all. With this knowledge, this understanding, you are now free. Free. Keep washing it through. No more bad habits, no more negative life circumstances. Don't worry about any of that. You're free now. Live the life you've always dreamed of. Here's what happens. Let's talk about some positives right here. I've talked a lot about pain today, but what I found, curiously, is that when I was free to face my painful memories, a lot of very bright, positive memories surfaced as well. I now have sense memories that I'd long since buried. The smell of the paint when I tried to paint my bike blue and I used this poster paint. I remember the smell of that now. And I remember the smell of the garden, the roses in autumn as they were dying. I remember that smell, the dew, the summer, the particular, the smell of the corner shop when I was a kid, when I had my 20 pence of pocket money and I went to go buy those little pink shrimps you can get. Suddenly I remembered the smell of those pink shrimps. I'd forgotten all about those memories. I'd forgotten those. I remember the smell of the science lab at school. And I remembered I'd buried all of my school memories because so much of it was so painful. But this is how the mind works. When you bury one feeling, you bury them all. That's the tragedy. When you bury one feeling, you bury all of them. And in uncovering and digging up the painful feelings, I ended up digging up some of my positive memories and feelings as well. And the times that it was okay, actually. And I did do well and I was liked and the teachers did like me and the times that, so the smell of the science lab, the smell of the PE room, the feeling of sunshine on my skin when it was Friday afternoon and we had double PE and we finally got to do some practical and go play cricket, go play rounders. And it was Friday and you knew it was a sunny day. You remember those sorts of memories? That's the sort of feeling that resurfaces. You get the happy memories as well as the negative ones. That's the positive stuff that's waiting for you. And now you will be free to live the life that the child always dreamed of. The bright future that you imagined when you were a child, you've probably long since buried because life just got too painful to even dare to dream, to even dare to hope. Well, now you can dare to hope again. Now you can dare to dream again. Dare to dream. Face it. Face the apprehension. Face the worry. What if it all goes wrong? Yeah, well, what if it does? Who cares? Who cares? You're free now. If your whole life goes wrong, well, you just come back and do it again in the next one. That's how it works. I'm telling you, that's how it works. Just be free. Live the life. Take the risk. Live the life you've always dreamed of. Allow yourself to refeel the positive memories as well as the negative ones. I guess that's my bit of final advice on the towards path. Have the courage, because nostalgia often feels painful because we feel like we're longing for something. We feel a sense of loss or grief alongside our nostalgia. But have the courage and confidence to feel that too. Allow that to come back up. How did it feel to hang out with your friends How did it feel when you finally passed your driving test? How did it feel when you had that first night out, that first party, your first kiss, your first relationship? How did that feel? Really re-feel that, and you will rekindle the hope and joy, the promise of life. And that's how to heal. That's how to heal. Ultimately, it all comes down to love. But as for the final piece of the puzzle, the final piece, the piece at the heart of it all, is that ultimately the resolution that lies at the heart of it all is the recognition that you are the consciousness that is aware of this entire process. You're aware of the pain of the inner child. And then at some point, if you're deep, deep in meditation along the spiritual path, you recognize that you're also aware of the adult that is healing the pain of the inner child. You're aware of both of these. You're aware that even the process of healing is itself a story. And it's a necessary story, and it's a marvelous play of life. And all of these feelings are very real, very visceral. But if you really want to finally do this, to be done with the whole thing, and just to live your life in total peace, it's to realize that all of it, even the healing process, is witnessed by the infinite space of consciousness that is the peaceful, calm, ever-present, ever-loving backdrop to everything. And in that space, you can even hold the adult that is supporting the adult's inner child. And this too is seen. This too is witnessed. And the ultimate space, the ultimate peace, is that nothing is actually happening. That's going to sound very odd considering everything I've just said in this talk, but just bear with me. These words might not be for everyone, okay? If you've got something out of everything I've said thus far, and I'm starting to go into a realm that might be a bit much or require a bit too much of the spiritual terminology and stuff, I would more than understand if that's enough for today, and you've heard enough to help you, and you can go on your way with what I've said thus far. I will totally understand. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Follow me on YouTube. If you follow me on Spotify, follow me on Spotify. If you don't follow me on YouTube, and thanks for everything. Sayonara. But if you want to go all the way to the very top of the mountain, to get to the top of the mountain and then take off, this is the recognition and understanding. Nothing is happening. Nothing. There is no adult. There is no child. There is no story. There is no world. There is no universe. There is nothing. All of it is the mind. All of it. Every feeling, every thought, every story, every image, every memory, everything is not real. There is an appearance. There is the illusion of something happening. That is true. The illusion of something happening is happening. But nothing is real. Nothing. All of it is an illusion. To be free of suffering is to be free of this illusion, the Maya. The illusion will remain. All of the colors, sights, sounds, smells, everything will remain. Even the thoughts, feelings, memories, all of that will remain. But understand on a very deep level, nothing is happening. Nothing at all. Sink deeply back into the unmanifested, the light beyond light, the infinite space of peace and bliss that sits behind everything, that is the source of the infinite manifestation of this illusion, has its root in the unmanifest silence behind it all. Within each of us is a silence that beckons us into itself, as Meister Eckhart said that. The silence, the void. You can rest within the void. Be free of everything within the void. Be free of everything within the infinite expanse of nothing. Nothing at all. And in that space you are free, because nothing happened. Ever. You are not the fragile, vulnerable body. You are not the fragile, vulnerable mind subject to all of the terror, all of the trauma, all of the pain, all of the rage. None of that ever happened to you. All of that happened to the story. But you are not the story. You are that which is aware of the story. Sink back into the awareness. Sink back into the unmanifest. How to do this? How to do this? Withdraw attention from everything. Just as the clouds are temporary appearances in the sky, come to recognize everything in the physical world around you is a temporary appearance within the void. And you too, your physical body, your mind, your thoughts and feelings are a temporary appearance within the void. That is all. A temporary appearance within the void, but you are eternal. You are infinite. You cannot die. You were never born. You cannot die. You cannot be hurt. You cannot be harmed. You cannot be stained. You are perfect. Perfect. Flawless. Like a shining diamond. Flawless. Pure. Open. Empty. Infinite peace. That is the final healing. That's beyond that gate is nothing more, because that's it. There can't be any more after that. That's it. It's done. It's over. But these words are too much to bear for so many people. They don't want to hear it. But if you're serious about peace and you want to get to the top of the mountain, that is what you must understand. Jump over the moon. Jump over the moon by dropping the false self, the false world, the false reality. Escape the matrix. It is nothing. There is an appearance, but there is no existence. Existence means to stand out. Ex istare, to stand out. Nothing stands out from consciousness. Everything is held as an appearance within consciousness. So what happens when the knight leaves the cave with the inner child? Well, I can only speak to my experience, but when I knew it was done, I knew I was happy and at peace with myself and reconciled my past, when I was sat in a deep meditation and I was simply the light of conscious awareness, and an appearance, an image, an imagination arose of a beach, and the waves were gently lapping at the shore. And it was one of those beautiful sunsets, one of those beautiful evenings where the sand and the sea is just bathed in golden light, and the sunlight shimmers on the waves in the evening calm. One of those calm, peaceful evenings where all is well. And I realized I was the light that was shining on the waves. I was the light that shone on the beach, and I became aware that there were two figures sat on the beach. There was Corin Bryant, the adult, and there was Corin Bryant, the child. And they were sat together at peace, happy, calm. And they smiled at me, and I smiled at them. and we all finally knew that all is well. Thank you so much for listening to The Power of Now What, episode 20. I really wish that I could express just how deeply grateful I am to everyone listening and everyone who's taken the time to hit that like button and hit that subscribe. Doing this podcast has helped me so much in ways that I can't even begin to describe, in ways that I probably don't even quite understand myself just yet. I've been recording most of these from bed because I've got this. I'm just going through quite a lot at the moment in terms of health conditions with this chronic pain, and not only has this been an outlet and kept my mind active and given me something to do, it actually feels so fulfilling, and so I feel like I'm fulfilling my life's purpose. And there's a great deal of power in that. To be able to fulfill your life's purpose whilst in bed is really quite something. But I wouldn't be able to do it if there weren't any listeners. And so, the old Zen koan of, if a tree falls in the woods, does it make a sound? Well, it only makes a sound if there's somebody around. So if a tree falls in the woods and nobody is around to hear it, does it make a sound? Well, I guess it doesn't. It makes a noise, but it can only make a sound if somebody hears it. And that's how I feel about doing this podcast. I could sit here and record all of this, but if I didn't have an audience, if I didn't have somebody to listen, then nothing would be happening. It would just be a noise. So I just wanted to say thank you for listening. And in the words of the Beach Boys, perhaps that's very relevant considering that final analogy, that final metaphor I just used. In the words of the Beach Boys, God only knows what I'd be without you. And I'm going to take a little break from doing the Power of Now What, just because doing this episode has really taken it out of me in a very deep way. And so I'm just going to take a little bit of time to reorient myself and just let the dust settle a little bit. But I will bring it back, but it might be a few weeks, and maybe. I just don't know. I just do what my inspiration tells me to do, basically. But I'm going to take a break from doing the Power of Now What for a little while. I'm going to carry on focusing on other projects on YouTube. So if you follow me on Spotify, make sure you follow me on YouTube. I'm there as Corin Bryant. And if you follow me on YouTube, remember to go follow me on Spotify. You can find me on Instagram, Corin_Bryant_. If you want to connect with me on anything, maybe you want to send me a message, got any ideas, thoughts, feelings, whatever, connect, let's connect. And you can always drop something in the comments if you'd like to. And I thought, well, episode 20, that's a nice round number. Maybe it's time to take a little break. And maybe this is the end of series 1. Yeah, we'll look at it like that. This is the end of series 1 of The Power of Now What. Who knows what's coming in series 2? Maybe I'll change up the format a little. But watch this space. I might start a second podcast. But I'll let you know if I do. And I'm just going to keep pouring out the content on YouTube because I love it. And there's some positive feedback coming through, so I'll keep that up. I hope my words find you well today, because I know a lot of the people that listen have been going through their own struggles, troubles. I just want to let you know that you're not alone. You're not alone. And this particular subject, this particular aspect of recovery and healing is the worst part. But once it's done, it's done. And there's not going to be anything worse than that. You only get one childhood, right? So once you've healed that, that's the end of that. And if you're really going through the ringer, I just want to let you know that you are going to be okay. And I know how painful it is and how rough it is. It's awful at times, but you will pull through and you will make it. That is The Power of Now What, episode 20. Take care, be well, and stay present.